I am so excited to be here with you today on day 4 of my YouTube challenge that I'm walking through, where I'm just challenging myself to post for who knows how long, so that I can finally get out of my head and metabolize and work out all of the things that have been stirring inside of me. If we haven't met yet, my name is Sunshine, and I'm here to just help instill courage in you to go through things you need to go through so you can become who you're supposed to be and do what you're supposed to do. So, let me give you a little bit of context and backstory, just hopefully kind of quickly. It was almost a year ago at this exact time of year where I was sitting, I worked from home mostly. I was hybrid slash mostly remote for a company that I loved and for a boss who was just absolutely incredible, best boss ever. Had already known that I was going to be going back to school. I really wanted to go for a doctorate degree. And so I had been looking into schools, and there was a really great online school that I thought I'm going to check this out and, whatever. One day I was sitting in my office working from home, and I had had just a rough morning. And so I, on my lunch break, called the school and I was like, hey, I've already asked a lot of questions. I just have 2 more questions. I asked my questions and I was like, all right, I want to put in an application. So we just did it over the phone and everything was great. I got an email a few minutes after that saying, hey, congratulations, you've started this process and here's what your next steps are. I screenshotted that email and texted it to my husband, Ryan, who knew that I had been like thinking about doing this, but probably had no idea that I was that close to just pulling the trigger on it. And so, anyway, I just texted him. I was like, hey, I know that I need to go after this, or I'm going to just like feel stuck in this and I need to move forward. And he was like, you know, we've been married a long time, and so he knows these things about me. It doesn't surprise him, but also he's like, "So how's that all gonna work?" I'm like, "I don't know. I haven't thought through that yet, but I do know that I just needed to take that first step. I needed to show myself that I was going to move forward on something." So that's the backstory. So then I kept my job. That was in the fall of last year. The program didn't start until January, and I had talked to my boss, and just through timing and all of that, we decided that I would step away from my position on March 1st. So from like January to March 1st, I was working full time. In that program, you had to take like kind of an intro to their school class. I ended up signing up for that intro class was like an 8-week class and my first actual class for my program at the exact same time. So my first like 4 weeks of school were just like I felt like my brain was going to explode because little things like I couldn't even figure out how to get signed into the system or just things that were like but I was learning them as I went in my first class, but I was doing them simultaneously. And if I would have done that first, I would have been totally fine for my first doctoral class, but that's just not how it worked. So, anyway, fast forward, I ended up taking 5 classes or so. It was in a doctorate of leadership, so of strategic leadership specifically. And I loved a lot of the content for the most part. There's so much that I did love. I loved the research. I loved the writing for the most part. I loved feeling like I was standing on the shoulders of the scholars who have gone before me, that I was drawing from this well of knowledge and, yeah, just research and all these things. So I was loving so much of it. It was wildly overwhelming. Finding my footing took a minute, but I loved it. I felt like I was in among my people as it related to the level of schooling that we were in. That's like my dream. Like if I could be a lifelong student and get paid for that and I'd be in school the rest of my life. I can just tell you that. And Ryan already knows. Anyway, but with that process, the last couple of classes that I had taken, I mean, I only took 5 classes. They were about 5, 4, I don't know. They were 8-week sessions is how this school worked and I was going. So maybe 5, I don't know. Either way, as I was going through the process, what I started to realize is that a lot of the material we were studying, I had learned the material in my master's program of organizational leadership or executive coaching and consulting. Either of those programs covered everything we were learning in the doctoral program. But the difference was we were learning how to think like doctors, how to write like doctors. But what I came to realize is that through that process, that's when I started to really flesh out this idea that I care so much more about the individual leader than maybe I do like continually talking about the same things over and over. Like just all the different leadership styles. I'm like, okay, you can talk about that 1,000 times over. And it felt like we were. And that's when I started to realize like I am deeply passionate about mission, vision, values, purpose, strategy. All of those things feel like they're just second nature to me and I could talk about them in my sleep. I love them so much. And yet I felt like, okay, I can only talk about this so much from so many different angles. And so it was just starting to feel a little monotonous in regards to like the research level and the workload and all of that. Anyway, one of the last class that I ended up taking, I realized it was in that class that I'm like, this is not the program for me. I want to go after something from a different angle. I had taken this class in my master's program, neuroscience and leadership, and that like just lit a fire inside of me. So, with that being said, I kind of had this understanding when I was going to go into the program that I went into for my doctoral program that I would be maybe talking about some of that same sort of neuroscience leadership type stuff, but that just wasn't the case. And I wasn't misled by any means. It just wasn't the case. And so, but what I did find is that every time I had to write a paper, which was a ton, or post, which was a ton, I constantly on our like little library where we would do our online research, I was constantly in there putting like the filter of like psychology, sociology. Like I wanted to understand leadership and leadership principles, but from a different perspective, not so much like organizationally, but just from a different angle. And so that was really huge for me to be able to identify and acknowledge and realize, you know what, I keep getting drawn back into this one main area of research. And so, with that being said, I dropped my second summer class. The school has multiple schools, a school of business, a school of leadership, a school of whatever, under the umbrella. And one of the things that they have is a school of psychology. And so I just started to think about, you know, what would it look like for me to apply to the school of psychology, to get a PhD in psychology slash counseling, to really be able to research the psychology of leadership or research just the psychology of our everyday lives and things that hold us back and things that motivate us and push us. I did love the school. I loved like the whole process. It was just I knew that program wasn't a good fit for me. So anyway, where I'm at right now is I've actually I'm that program doesn't start for another couple of months if I choose to go in that direction. There's another option on the table too as far as a potential school, you know, like what I might do instead, zigzagging and all of that. But at the end of the day, that is the synopsis of the journey of really the last year of my life. Now you kind of know the context of the story. I just want to recap. I have a couple of lessons that I've learned from being in and then really dropping out of the doctoral program. And I say that jokingly. A friend really pushed back when I was telling my like a close knit group of friends. I was like, so I'm a doctoral school dropout. And they're like, well, hold on, you're not because you might this. And I'm like, I appreciate that. And also, yes, I am. So it's both and I know that that's possible. Okay, so here's like a first lesson that I've learned is that it is critical to take action when you know that you need to take action. So if I would have not called the school that day and, you know, just continued on in life, I would have started to grow resentful around my current situation. There would have been an attitude of like a lack of self agency. And all of that had already kind of started to happen because I felt stuck in this situation. Like, you know, this is the job I have and this is the life we have and all of that. And I needed something different. So taking action for me is absolutely the thing that springboards me into knowing that I have agency. I didn't know if it was the right action. I didn't know, but I took action. And that is hands down one of the most important lessons that I can learn from this whole process and that I would just pass on to somebody else is if you've got that stirring, even just calling the school and saying, like, here are my two unanswered questions. I'd already done a bunch of research and I just had two specific extra questions. And then it was like on the phone, I'm like, well, you've answered my questions. Yes, let's move forward. But the action was calling the school that day to say, I've got these two unanswered questions. I know that I'm guilty of this, and I know that other people do this too, where it's like we'll just keep ruminating on those unanswered questions instead of just picking up the phone and calling and saying, just answer these two questions for me, and then I can move forward. So, anyway, lesson number one was making sure that if we're thinking about doing something, we have to take action, even if it's what we would deem a small action, such as picking up the phone and calling. Number two is that it's okay. It is okay to decide something is not for you. I know that I would have never known about the doctoral experience had I not gone for it, and that is something I'm walking away from is I'm so grateful. I am so grateful that I did go through 5 classes, 4 or 5, whatever it was, that I've gone through that process because now I know what is required of a doctoral student. Now I understand all the time that it's going to take, the life choices you have to make differently because you're a doctoral student. I'll talk about this in a second, but there were things that I was just simply not expecting that I had to even say no to. Like, I love to say yes to all the invitations and I'm all about people and all that, but there were things that I'm like, I actually have a paper due and this takes me so much longer because I'm new to it and all of that. But if I had not, gone through that process, then I would have never known. So it is okay to decide something is not for you once you get started. I want to live my life in such a way that is integrated, that I have the courage to say, I did this and I stopped doing this. That doesn't make me a quitter. It doesn't mean I failed. It just means that that wasn't for me and I can take a step back. It takes so much courage to say, I've tried this and this is not for me. Again, for me in my specific context, it's not so much being a student in a doctoral program, it was that specific program. So I could have easily gone through the process and kept going and resented it, felt stuck in that, but it just simply wasn't for me. So lesson number two is it's okay to decide something isn't for you once you're already fully in it. So I think there's other lessons tied to that, like how do you navigate out after that? I think it's a sign of maturity to not just up and quit and say like, I don't need this and this isn't for me and all that, but it's like a slow off ramp. But like, how do you do an off ramp? You put on your turning signal. So for me, that looked like if you're in the middle lane and you need to get over to the right and get off on the exit, it's putting on your turn signal. So for me, that looked like calling my academic advisor and saying, hey, I don't think this program is the best fit for me, but I want to finish out the class that I'm in. And so, what does that look like? So that for me was like putting on the turn signal. As I was finishing out that class, that was me moving closer and closer and closer to that right-hand lane so that I could slowly get off the exit ramp. Part of that was telling some of my very close friends and people I consider, they know my heart, they know my life. And so putting that before them and saying like, hey, this is where I'm at. Like, what do you think about this? And them saying like, oh, that makes total sense. Once I explained, it's the psychology side and da, da, da. Anyway, so just their support meant the world to me because I know that I need their insight. I need their vantage point. I can't see everything. So I'm like, do I have any blind spots? Oh, that'll preach. As I'm getting off the exit, it's like, do you see something I'm not seeing? Because I can't just like stop my car in the middle of the highway. No, it's a slow off ramp. So if you're in the middle of doing something you don't want to do anymore, be mature about it. But it is okay to decide that you don't want to do that thing anymore. All right. That was lesson number two. Lesson number three is I simply do not know what I do not know. And that's kind of going back to that blind spot scenario is you just don't know what you don't know. For me, the amount of energy and time that it took to write one single paper, which I remember one of the professors saying, oh, this is just a short one. It's just 3,000 words. I'm like, okay, well, when I was in my master's program, that was like a capstone project was 3,000 words. But this was just our life now. And that's the part of I don't know what I don't know. And so that's why I'm super grateful I did it, is because now I understand. But in both of my master's programs, I did really, really well. I loved both of those programs. And when I got in my doctoral program, I was struggling so much. I felt like I was drowning. I felt like I called my professor in the middle of my first class, not the like on-ramp class, but the real class. And I was like, "Hey, I don't think I'm going to pass this class." And she's like, "Hey, I can't at this point, like I was too far in to drop it and I was too like we were too close." So she's like, "You're going to have to finish this out or just take an F." And or whatever, an incomplete or however it worked, which was worse than just getting the grade. So I had to like keep going, but in that I'm like, I didn't know it was going to be so hard. I didn't know that it was going to be so time consuming. And all I knew was going off my master's programs. And so, but it was just a totally different experience. So I had talked to other doctoral students. I had reached out for help. There were some things that I did do, but there was just, there were things I didn't know that I didn't know. And so that is a major lesson. Like you're going to have blind spots. You're going to have things you don't know that you don't know. And it's just a matter of asking for insight, asking for, validation. Like, am I seeing things clearly? Is there something I'm not seeing? So if you're in the middle of something like that, where you're like, I am in way over my head, it's okay. You probably didn't know things you didn't know. It's taking a step back, acknowledging those things, and then weighing them and saying like, okay, now that I do know what I know, how do I want to proceed? And you get the choice to do whatever you want with that. You get to either keep going, you can exit, you can, but once you acknowledge, oh, there were things that are going on that I just didn't know, and I didn't know what I didn't know, it's just so freeing. So, those are just some of the lessons that I've learned through the process of applying for my doctoral program, starting the doctoral program, dropping out of the doctoral program. Technically, I'm still enrolled in one class that I need to call and actually drop because I know that that is just not the right program for me. I know that there's next steps coming. I don't even know necessarily what they are, but I am going through the process of walking through open doors and thinking about like what makes the most sense at this season of our life, what makes the most sense for the future. So there are all kinds of questions I'm asking myself as I move forward. I'm bringing in really close friends to help me just discern what is happening in my life right now. And so, yeah, that's how I navigate, and these are some lessons that I've learned along the way of doing something I'd never done before and not knowing about it in the least. If you're in a situation like that, like me, where you're like even just a year ago and deep in your gut, in your heart, that something's got to give, something's got to change, you're not on the trajectory of life that you want to be, I just want to encourage you. What does it look like to dream again, to take a step back and look at your whole life and what one single small action can you do, even if it's getting an answer to an unanswered question? What is something you can do? Because at the end of the day, you are in total control of your life. It is up to you. I appreciate the fact that there are outside variables that are outside of your control. So, all right, that's that. I'm excited that I'm posting on day 4. I'm excited to jump in and keep going and learn and grow. And I've been learning something new about editing, which, pause, side note, I've talked a couple of times about how I just have not loved my backdrop in my videos. And that was one of the things that has stopped me from posting, which I know it sounds crazy, but it's one of the 15 things I named. But anyway, last night I decided I'm going to do something about this. Like I hate that this is, standing in my way. I hate that, I just keep feeling like unsettled in my office here. And so I just decided and then I kind of got my husband in on it, but we took down this massive bookshelf that was on this back wall, and it was two giant pieces and then one connecting piece. And shout out to Ryan for helping me facilitate some of that, because I know this is silly, but it was standing in my way. It was just this giant bookshelf that I actually loved when I first put in. And then it just wasn't serving the purpose anymore. We've done some other rearranging. So once all of those other things settled, it felt like this thing I loved so much at some point actually was just it was standing in my way. So we took it down. And now we remembered, like, there were all kinds of things on the wall. We're like, "Oh, yeah, we just put the bookshelf against those things." So we took all those things down, and just over the next couple of weeks, I'm probably gonna be doing some different things in here. I don't know, but either way, I'm super proud of the fact that I just couldn't stand it, and I know it's something that's been holding me back, so I decided to do something about it, which anyway, that'll preach. Okay, all right, so that's that. We are done for today, and I look forward to seeing you again tomorrow. See ya.